What would Churchill do, especially in such turbulent times? I can't think of anyone better to ask than his own living grandson, Dr. Churchill. And just to be transparent, Dr. C, with the audience, we were conceptualizing and talking offline. What should we talk about with everybody this week? There's so much going on in the world. And I said, here in the States, everybody's all wrapped up and, heightened with ICE and immigration. And, it's so polarized and aggressive and intense. Should we dive into it? And you said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said, this is an issue, it will get resolved, but people are being short-sighted. They're not looking at the big picture here and a real threat, especially to the US. And that is China and its growing role on the world stage. And specifically, you introduced to me an idea really popularized in 2011, 2012 by an American political scientist, if I pronounce this correct, Thucydides Trap, in which a rising power is threatening an established ruling power, so to speak. So I would love for you to just take it away. I have my questions, comments, concerns that many people may or may not have, but why this is weighing so heavily on your heart and mind.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you very much for bringing this up. And without a preamble, I want to wish you happy birthday,
Oh, why,
knowing
thank
that
you.
you are growing in wisdom, but not in years, based on the looks of you. So
Not a
happy
day
birthday.
past 21, for all
I say
intents and purposes.
17. I'm going on
Exactly.
18.
You know what? No other way I would spend it or spend the pre-birthday than here with you, imparting even more wisdom. And in all seriousness, I am so excited to dive into this topic. So thank
And
you.
so am I. So am I. Thank you, dear Taylor. And again, happy
Yes.
birthday because you are a very jolly and good fellow.
well,
All the
well,
best.
thank you. But I'll tell you, if I were in charge, I wouldn't be so jolly good fellow to, one Xi Jinping. But we'll get to that. We'll get to
We'll
that.
get to that.
We'll lay down the
Indeed,
law.
indeed. Let's do.
Yes.
Let's do. That's very important. We know that China's lifetime dictator, uh, Xi Jinping, has been very clear about what his goals are, what his ambitions, and what is the master plan for China during his lifetime that's foreseen to be a long one. And it is foreseen to be a long one because he's married to power forever. They changed the constitutional system of the Chinese Republic in order to ensure that the current president is a
Mhm.
lifetime president, very much like the Pope. It's the kind of job, I suppose, that they like, that they can be carried out of the office as opposed to be able to walk out under their own steam. And that's good and bad. The good thing about it is that there is a maintenance of stability in the Chinese nation. And at least we know whom we are dealing with because we've taken a measure of the man ever since he, as a young man, he came here and he spent significant time in Iowa educating himself about agricultural methods that are used in America and many other important subjects. What is also important to know is that having seen his iron will, and I speak of that because I had had the opportunity to meet with the man. I must say that it's a very impressive personality. It's a very intelligent personality. And his plans are married with the state because he sees China as an emperor, as a current day emperor with a long
Uh-huh.
term perspective of building the empire more, enlarging his empire, and making it unquestionably the number one power on this earth, including sending security services and establishing Chinese police presence within major cities in Europe and in the US in order to control their own foreign population. They are financing all this militant activity of terrorist groups like Antifa and many others because they understand that if we tear the fabric of our own republic to our own hands, financed and supported by China, we would never be capable to meet the growing threat that China presents to the US.
You
Because
know,
our house is falling apart, how could we rebuild our military in order to meet the demand that we have when we are going to be
right.
confronting China in the field of honor, in the field of battle? This is the key.
You know, you completely read my mind. There's, first of all, there's so much to unpack here. And there's so many avenues that we could go. But first of all, even just for the average person, right, who's a little bit plugged in and on the pulse of what's going on. I mean, we hear often, even like the Xi Jinping, like a punchline, even culturally or in pop culture, like US versus China, but what that really looks like. And what's fascinating to me is, and I think this is where, you know, your grandfather, Winston Churchill, really did have such a hard line when it came to where ego gets involved, right? There's logistics, and of course there's economic power, culturally, technology, militarily, all of this. But when all of these foreign affairs come into play, and almost like a game of chess, where fear and ego become part of the equation here, right? And when you're going back, even when we're looking at the Thucydides Trap, way back, the origins of this, right? Sparta and Athens, and Sparta being really the established powerhouse, and Athens becoming more, you know, culturally, economically relevant. And when you're looking at a modern lens, of course the states, you know, is such a huge threat because we are the powerhouse in all these facets, right, on the world stage. To take it back, perhaps. Well, actually, no. Before we do that, because I do want to put it on the lens of your grandfather's time, but before that, you really hit what I was thinking, which is adversarial forces like a China coming in, be it protests, causing chaos here, ripping
Mhm.
apart the fabric, right, of our society. You know, again, I'm a millennial and a content creator, and I always will be vocal, even about a TikTok, Dr. C, right? And, you know, coming out of the CCP, and now there's a whole debate, is it more America owned? But I don't think that it's crazy that an entity like TikTok would brainwash American youth to then, you know, make them stronger and make us weaker. So you kind of just hit at that, but why isn't that crazy or conspiratorial? And why would something even like that seems so frivolous and silly and surface level, like a TikTok, be so
Mhm.
detrimental, right? And what it could imply with AI, cyber attacks, etc. Like why that really creeps into America's youth, society, and makes us fall apart from the inside.
Excellent, excellent. The question that you pose is actually at the root of the problem.
Yeah.
What Winston Churchill understood and what he did is that he was never looking at a problem, at an issue superficially. He would always dig deep to find the root of the issue. And once you find the root, then you can actually
Mhm.
propose solutions to exhume the root and therefore kill the whole conspiracy instead of just kind of trimming the leaves all around it and collecting flowers and think you accomplished something.
Right,
Case
right,
in
right.
point, the disparity between the power, the rising power of Germany before World War, that for 10 years he harped about it in parliament and in any forum that he was given, public or private. He had a personal experience and a lot of intelligence to come to the parliament and speak to the prime minister and say, look, the German war machine, it outnumbers, it outpowers, and it certainly could easily defeat, anything we can put in the field. Why don't we do something about it? So
Mhm.
it comes to me that recognizes these patterns in history and recognizes the same patterns in what's going on today to speak to our president, to speak to our House of Representatives and say, we are woefully underprepared. So imagine that our enemy has 10 times the airplanes, 10 times the vessels, the shipping vessels. They certainly have far more than 10 times the army, the numbers. They have incredible, almost 2 million people who are engaged in cyber attacks, or
Mhm.
at least what they call the computer army. When we were developing the Space Force and we were looking outside of our atmosphere, they were developing their computer force, which is close to 2 million people who can hack our networks and they can unleash their Armageddon simply remotely with a few strokes of the computer keyboard. This is a threat that we had not envisioned before. This is a threat far greater than anything AI can offer to us. And this is asymmetrical warfare. I want to remind you about those silly balloons that they claim to be weather
Oh,
balloons that they were
yes.
flying up in the stratosphere. And we shot down one. But to tell you the truth, from what I know from China, they had sent out about 30,000 of them, continuously, perusing the air and gathering better intelligence than anything we can have from satellites. I have not been known to be conspiratorial. I'm not interested in being a warmonger, but I have to tell the truth, and that's my may. When I was going to Oxford University, they called me Verissimus, and that means the truth teller. War is imminent. The very basis of the Thucydides Trap is the fact that when a rising power starts competing in earnest with
Mm-hmm.
the existing predominant empire,
Yes.
with the existing power, conflict is inevitable in order for the determination to come of who will be the global leading power and who will no longer be. We've been a world power for about 80 years, maybe a little bit more in the sense that we are the supreme, powerhouse and the empire.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, we have had enough because through the dispersion of belief in our own country, through the imposition of external forces that cause our own people to be nihilistic, they don't believe in anything, pessimistic, they don't believe that they
Right.
can win anything, especially the young generations, and above all else, soft to the point that they would
Mm-hmm.
never stand up and fight.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Yep.
occupying
All
themselves,
the above.
watching a screen, all day long, and
Yeah.
above all else, the tremendous fear that is introduced to them of having anything that means physical confrontation. So going to war is exactly that. And
I
if
was,
you're afraid of doing it, then you are lost. So the
yeah.
mental attitude is always being said because the book of war in China is Sun Tzu's, The Art of War. And that clearly says that
Yeah.
all wars are born psychological and they are executed psychologically
Yeah.
and they are won psychologically. As we are looking at the future, including with nuclear weapons, that, you know, they are already used against us, claiming that it was done by North Korea, as we know what happened in Hawaii a few years ago in
Mm-hmm.
2016 or so,
Mm-hmm.
into which everybody in the islands of Hawaii received a message that in 20 minutes everybody would be dead because there is an
Mm-hmm.
incoming missile. And then, once this thing was shot down by the naval forces around Hawaii, then they claimed they sent out the alarm by mistake. But it was just a poor cover up. They failed to do this time because I had warned the admirals of the fleet 1 year earlier. And how did I suffer? I received an assassination attempt when I was having a speech in Microsoft in
Wow.
Seattle the following year. So,
Wow.
they're very keen, but they suffered the loss there because they claimed that this was done by North Korea,
Right.
whereas it was Chinese who gave it to the North Koreans to send over. And we dodged the bullet then, but that means we got lucky. We can't be
Yeah.
lucky every day. They only need to get lucky once and hit a big target in the US. And then they would say, well, North Korea did it. We did not. They turn up the heat, slowly
Sure.
and slowly. So it can become used to the aspect
Sure.
that China is supreme. When you go to markets like Walmart and even Amazon, and you see 90% of the products built in China,
Yeah.
we finally come to an understanding that we are unable to build anything in America. So even our defensive weapons, we must buy them from them. This is the ridiculousness of what we have allowed to happen in the
Yeah.
last 50
Yeah.
years to invade America through many layers of ideology, terror,
Sure.
and discord.
And
These
I'll
are the
just
weapons.
I'll just interject here too. And I think something that you really hit at, right, was the real, we can go on all day long about, it's certainly the politically correct thing to do about, privilege in America and who has privilege and who doesn't. And when we're looking big picture and we zoom out and looking at the world stage, a real privilege is being American and living and being in this country, right? And so many, it's lost on so many people again. And I said this in the last episode because we are in such a self involved, plugged in, selfish culture where these people have no idea what it would be like to live, in the likes of like under a CCP or Iran, like we talked about last week, right? They have
Yeah.
no idea. And especially we have that privilege because we haven't experienced these wars on our shore. We haven't. Our generations haven't. So we have no idea. Like it's just so you know, ignorant for better or worse.
Mhm.
And some of the time, inadvertent, right? That we haven't experienced that. But that's the first thing. But and also, people do, as you told me offline, if I may share, people do, and prominent and influential leaders not only say that you look just like your grandfather, but ask for your advice on things, right? And even, what he would say. So to kind of wrap all of this up, it's a little bit of a twofold for you to kind of look backwards, maybe in the lens historically of where he was, and also looking forwards.
Yes.
Because the truth is, and he, if I'm correct, he passed shortly before China had nuclear weapons. So
Mhm.
he, and FDR had named China one of the four horsemen. Like he understood, he could foresee how they would be a threat. And I think Winston Churchill perhaps underestimated China and the threat that they would ultimately be. So I would love to hear your thoughts on why, and then B, again, because so much of this is so boiled down to psychology and fear and ego. I feel where your grandfather, like I said earlier, where he had a really hard line in the sand, was about national strength and identity. And that if you wavered or flip flop, that just invites people to come in and mess with you versus having a strong sense of this is who we are, do not mess with us. So, again, kind of looking back on why he maybe underestimated China and looking forward, given that that was his philosophy in this current context, what would Churchill do now about it?
Thank you. Uh, Most important, there is no excuse for underestimating your enemy. And I would say it was his opinion that by engaging with China, and he was the man who made absolutely certain to invite China to be part of the Security Council of the United Nations, because he thought by engaging an enemy, a communistic enemy, into the top of all of the nations in order to discuss peace, this would assure a longer lasting peace and playing by the same conditional rules that the big five had to play. So his genius showed that he invited China because he believed in the old adage, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. And what he actually would have said today is get them closer even. Start the dialogue today to
Mm-hmm.
break down the warmongering because its inevitability can be deflated. And the famous thing about Thucydides Trap, it goes that even in the time when Athens and Sparta were competing against each other, and there was the famous 50-year wars that they consumed all of the youth of both nations, they could have been prevented by engaging in the communal dialogue as it was given to them from the Oracle of Delphi. It starts here and now. And only then, when you exhibit an extremely strong position in your own country and you project this image abroad, your enemies will respect you to such an extent that they will think twice about messing with you. And that's what I want to accomplish by waking up our political establishment, both houses, especially the President, the White House, the War Department, and the State Department, and say, time is nigh. Either we do now a complete rebuild and reshuffle of our military forces, or we are all going to die. But what we count on are the stout American, God fearing people who believe in God and country, like you and I, and so many other good people we know, and they're willing to fight and die
Mm-hmm.
for what we hold sacred in these 250 years of our young republic. So God bless America, and may you survive another 250. Thank you, Taylor.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
happy birthday to you for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. And all I'll say to top that off is I feel, especially now more than ever, people aren't mobilized until it hits close to home. So let's not even get that far.
Let's hope so.
Thank you.
Let's celebrate life of 250
Yes.
years and hope to build the future for another 250. Thank you and God
Yes,
bless.
sir. Yes, sir. Your words to God's ears. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week. What would Churchill do from his grandson himself? Thank you so much, Dr. C. I'll see you next week.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.